Welcome to the Evening Review Show. My name is Jemima Beatrice, your host this evening. Now, before we go into our interview, let's have a look at tomorrow's headlines. Welcome back. Now today our guest is Linda Baumann, a human rights activist. She will be talking to us about gender-based violence in Namibia as we are going into the 16 days of activism. We will also look at how gender-based violence manifests itself in LGBTIQ spaces. Now thank you for joining us, Linda.
Thank you for having me, Jemima.
Now, Linda, can you just give us a brief background on what gender-based violence look like at this point as we go into commemorating the lives of those who have suffered gender-based violence?
I think nationally we are aware that the status of sexual and gender-based violence is very high. We also know that there's a great need to improve on the structural and legislative framework, but also the service delivery thereof and accessing mental and support system well-being, but also the immediate action towards getting protection orders, but also getting justice served towards those perpetrators. But also at the same time, there's also a high level of unreported cases, whether it is gay or lesbian or heterosexual. Just citizens that just choose not to report these cases because they have a number of reasons thereof. So it is a national discourse that is a great challenge that we're faced with as a country, and I think we as Namibians, we all need to stand up and be able to amplify the importance of protecting every person around us and creating a space of safety, but also at the same time ensuring that all persons are equal in terms of this protection.
So obviously, much of our support would usually come from society or the community that we live in. And we often speak, and actually widely we talk of safe spaces. Please tell us, what is a safe space?
Yeah, a safe space starts from home. I think that's the place of safety is the place where you grow up, where you know you're laying your head down. And that is supposed to be the immediate space that actually guarantees your well-being, your physical safety also, but broadly also as a space of greater support. And that is where the safety starts. And then going into the streets, there must also be a greater support system of a community that is alert and assertive to stand up for any person that experiences any form of violence, but also that there is continuous national protective measures like police visibility or community action groups that are visible in order to ensure that communities are not indulging themselves in such. Then there's also a broader national safety that we're looking at in terms of making sure that citizens are able to access these national services, and also that the legal framework enables them to realize their constitutional rights, but also broadly to make sure that Namibia is attained as a safe country for its citizens.
Now, one area that is not reported on significantly is obviously how gender-based violence manifests itself in gay and lesbian communities. Can you talk to us about that?
I think it's important to note that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender persons are no different from heterosexual people. We live in the same communities, we come out of the same houses where heterosexual people live. And of course, because of the status of our sexual orientation, the clear division has been set in this country. And it's also important to note that identifying as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender doesn't necessarily make you illegal. It's the practice of sodomy. But that interpretation has brought the nation to that standstill that it is illegal, but also there are influencing systems and factors that impact the prejudice and levels of discriminations that we experience, and these are cultural, it's religious, and also broadly societal influence that comes in it. So for us as LGBT people, we have cases, but also we have experiences where we have tried advancing our cases of violence, because violence happens in our families, where I can tell you from lived experiences and being a human rights defender in our community that I've documented cases where people experience violations from their own family members, uncles, brothers, sisters, and also the pressure of being reliant on your loved ones, and then your sexual orientation becomes the ultimatum of where you need to decide to be. And obviously when you're dependent, you will continue to be able to endure the level of violence. And then you go out of your house. The society does not accept you for who you are. They don't recognize you. The state doesn't recognize, and I've never had any head of state in this country saying there's a need to protect all citizens and include gay and lesbian people. That would be a history for my country if that ever happens, because if that is lamented, it will trickle down in the country. And I think I must acknowledge that there has been great strides and changes in some form of policy engagement and also service, mainly in the health fraternity in this country. And I commend my government around it. But there is a basic human rights thing here that is at play here when it comes to gender-based violence. If there is no proper recognition for LGBT people that they're equal, and that Chapter 3 of the Constitution does represent their identity and also their protection thereof, then there's no way any other citizen would be able to protect us as LGBT people. So that is why our cases go unreported. Many of the lesbian women, trans men, and of course trans women experience higher level of violence, and that also gets them to not even feel comfortable to lay a charge. I have experienced where members of the LGBT community go to law enforcement stations, and then they are humiliated, and then when they call somebody like myself to come and assist them, then you still have police officers saying that if you had acted in a particular way, you would have, if you have acted what you are born with, then you would have not experienced it. Otherwise, you would have fought back like a man. And those are things that I think that are unacceptable, because personal prejudice should not override the service that you give to our people. And that is why we need to be able to see how we strengthen the recognition of human rights of LGBT people, but also the equality of safety and protection and non-discrimination. And I think that's a huge challenge. And then the extended service access in terms of mental health or psychosocial support. Our services are not affirming our identities. They are not affirming and also appropriate to accommodate us within it. And usually, and I can tell you, having witnessed spaces of counseling and being a support system to some of our members, it's evident that the counselor has a very particular way and a heteronormative way of engaging our community members. And I think that's a part that we can strengthen as the movement within the country. And I think the country just needs to really reflect back on the Domestic Violence Act, because when we look at same-sex couples, there's a lot of same-sex couples living together. They've started their families, and they're experiencing violence in it, and they have no place to go and report. It's either attempted something or an assault. Well, I know I've been with you, Jemima, for 10 years. This has happened, and I want to report you because this is a domestic issue. And I don't know why it is a challenge that we cannot be included just for that basic protection. And I find it challenging because the Domestic Violence Act is very clear about what a domestic relationship is, and also what its conformity entails, but also broadly the extension around it. But so when it comes to same-sex, we're just nothing in this country. And I think that is something that the country needs to speak. Parliament as it is there, as much as they have funny debates that does not even concern the current narrative in the movement, I think the current narrative right now is bluntly the recognition of LGBTI people in this country, the importance of ensuring that we attain the same services and equal rights and security, because our security is challenged for our futures. We grow old, we're going to get 60, some of us are in our 40s, but the level of guarantee and security we're not able to get because the benefits cannot be equalized because of that status. And I think it speaks to a number of issues that needs to be addressed. And I think it's time we have a civil conversation in this country. And if we have to have a debate, and let it be a decent debate, not a debate about who's more evil than the other, but the basis of where do you see these Namibian citizens, and do they fit in this equation? And if they do, why can't we protect them? And I challenge my state around that.
Thank you. We'll take a few minutes break, and then we will come back to the role of civil society and how they are working towards changing these laws. We'll be back.
Across that river, Jordan, yes I am. I'm gonna leave my heart wide open, yes I am. Let me tell you, baby, yes I am. Yes I am. Oh baby, yes I am. Yes I am. Yeah, baby, yes I am. Yes I am.
Welcome back. So our conversation is about gender-based violence and the LGBTI community. Now, before we went on break, Linda, we were talking about the current legislation and the shortcomings, obviously. But you also said something about we have to have a civil conversation. Now, speaking about civil, do you think civil society is doing enough to lobby for change? I mean, like you said earlier, even with the councillors, they have a heteronormative attitude when they deal with key minorities. So do you think this also plays out in Parliament?
I think it springs out. It plays out on all fraternities of our communities, and I think a number of people are conflating or mixing the status of homosexuality, the status of same-sex marriage, and the status of the sodomy law. Those are completely different discussions. So right now, when we deal with the status of homosexuality, that initially speaks to the issue that is homosexuality illegal in this country? No, it's not. The media went wrong around it. The whole religious groups and cultural groups and citizens went wrong about it because it's not illegal to be homosexual in this country. That status is very clear. There's nothing to talk about. The status around that is shoved. Let's go to the next issue around same-sex marriage. There is not been any bill, no call for action on same-sex marriage in my history of knowing and being in the movement for 20 years now. The discussion there has been around the current court cases that encompasses same-sex couples and the recognition of those relationships in order for the partners and their children to be recognized in Namibia. The call hasn't been recognized our same-sex marriages. It's about the principle and the right and the constitutional provisions of the citizens that they're challenging. So nobody in this country put up the same-sex marriage. We're not asking government to even look into it. Then you have the issue around the sodomy law that everybody's going gaga around with, whereby the Law Reform Commission submitted a report. That report is very clear. We've been doing work on this sodomy law for more than 10 years now. And now that the report is out there, the idea around this report is to actually say that this law violates the constitutional provisions and, of course, consensual gay men's level of consent. It's not even saying that we want to promote homosexuality. It even speaks broadly about other aspects that are really infringing on constitutional provision. And it's not to say that this law is there to promote and legalize homosexuality. It's to make sure that people's right to privacy and right to dignity is attained in this country. So people must be very clear. So parliamentarians have got their understanding completely different. What they're doing, they're going into our bedrooms. And we're not going into anybody's bedroom. Article 13 is very clear. We're all protected under that in terms of the right to privacy. What the parliament needs to do is to talk about, do we respect and protect LGBT people in this country? I've not had that discussion. Nobody has the guts to talk about the rights of LGBT people and who we are. Because we are citizens. Here I am sitting with you talking about national issues. And even if you change the discussion away from LGBT, I still remain a woman that has a discourse to attain. So for me, it is a bigger and deeper conversation, and that is why the misinterpretation of our movement needs to be changed, because that narrative clearly laments and promotes homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, and that is very politically driven. And I think that initially needs to be addressed in this country so that citizens are respected, and that we are also able to build this country to where we see ourselves, because we're raising children, we're part of families. And I think for me, it's a deeper conversation if somebody is able to tell me, your status of homosexuality really infringes on the broader safety of this country, and nobody can tell me that. And I think that's an unfair way of us being judged, and also the way our relationships are seen in terms of sexual and gender-based violence. Because we are nothing. That is why the system do not regard and respect our relationships. The system looks at us as just any other. And I think that domestic relationship that has been coming for more than 10 years is always protected when it comes to a heterosexual setup, where families will bring the couples back together. We need to sort it out. What's your problem? What's your problem? I can speak from experience where there is greater pain, where our relationships break up around 10, 15 years. And our families they don't even know how to address the situation. But you can see the pain in both families, the pain in the couple that has been involved. And I think the humanity of who we are is disregarded in this country. And I find that a gross violation, especially when it comes to people who are supposed to protect me, whether they like me or not. Tolerance and acceptance are completely two different forms of discussion. The fact that I live in this country, the Namibians are tolerant of the person that I am. But I'm not asking any Namibian to accept me, because the beauty about diversity is the strength that brings us together.
Speaking about pain, so the former Mr. Namibia, Vendelinus Hamutenya, was assaulted and stabbed by his husband a few days ago. And so everybody is expecting him to take a specific stand now, that during this time. Do you think there are misconceptions when it comes? Do you think we are expecting different actions from heterosexual activists and different actions from gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender activists?
I think it's important to remember that activists are also just human beings. I mean, I might just be in a relationship where I experience violence, but also violence comes in different forms. There can be economic violence. That physical violence is always the one that is spoken about, and then also the emotional violence, and we don't speak about those ones. And I think for the fact that everybody expects Vendelinus to take a stance dehumanizes his emotions and his relationship. This is a same-sex couple, yet no different from a heterosexual relationship, because the heterosexual couple, how many of them have experienced this very same incident? And of course, it is perceived and seen completely different. Now the expectation is for Vendelinus to immediately hold his husband accountable. And how many cases out there have people just left and moved on to try and figure out how they sort it out? I think Vendelinus requires and must be given the level of privacy at all levels. And I think just like any other person. Yes, he is of public figure in terms of his credentials. But I also think the elements and the elements that caused the incident is of between the two of them, obviously, and if there's a justice system that needs to come at play, then that. I think our role as civil society in this play has been to make sure that both couples both of them get that level of mental well-being and support and counseling, but also at the same time making sure that Vendelinus' physical health is taken care of, because we know the partner is in custody. But I want the country to look at this relationship as no different, and it should be an alert, an alarm about how rife sexual and gender-based violence is in the LGBT community. And our cases go unreported, and when cases are reported, many of us go for morning after pills, post-exposure prophylaxis, and a bit of counseling, and we move on with our lives. And that shouldn't be the way, because trauma it takes its own turn and toil on a person. And not everybody has that strength to be able to move on. And I think if there is a general mainstream system that is able to reach any LGBT person, you don't necessarily need to be in Windhoek, then I think the system will be able to address the concerns that we're having in terms of our well-being and safety and protection. But I think broadly, Vendelinus's case must be respected. And the number of insults that we're getting, that we're seeing on social media, it's really disheartening. And I think people just need to realize that what has happened there is no different from a heterosexual relationship.
Thank you very much once again for joining us, Linda.
Thank you very much for having me, Jemima.
Thank you for tuning in. Good night.